The Saturnine spiritual path is predicated on the supposition that supernatural entities exist, and they are not just archetypes or projections on the part of the magician. Arthur Moros, in his book The Cult of the Black Cube, states very clearly that a powerful magician, if he's skilled enough, can interact with these entities. Through these entities, the magician gains power. However, power is not free. Anyone who thinks that there will not be a price to be paid is operating under delusion. In his words, demanding favors or power from spirits is a dangerous game. The entities are very real, and payment must always be rendered in full at the end of the physical life of the magician who makes a contract with dark forces. A magician must be aware of what he is getting into. Moros says that in many cases, blood sacrifice is normal and necessary, and that if a person is put off by this, he might as well realize ahead of time that he will not evolve in his practice of Saturnine magic. Also, one of the most concerning issues with communicating with and making contact with spirits and entities is that some might claim to be benevolent, but in fact might not actually be so. For this purpose, Moros suggests that the use of a grimoire is necessary, and a grimoire is a book on magic, a magical textbook. So who or what is the Saturnine deity that the adherents of the Black Cult and the Cult of the Black Cube worship? As previously noted, the deity appears in many cultures. In previous videos, the classical, Islamic, and Indian traditions were touched upon briefly. However, there were many stargazing civilizations that included awareness of a dark star. There are also many mythologies from around the world that include dark figures and even monstrous demons. The Germanic Wodan has many parallels to Saturn. Here's one description of Wodan that Moros includes in his book. Wodan, as a ruler of the dead, is well established, but as the god of the ecstatic, he also keeps a close relationship with the living. His bipolar nature encompasses both the world of the dead and the realm of the living, and his devotees are pulled toward him in moments of ecstatic rapture and transport. This magical magnetism was called Eros of the distance. Wodan is addressed as the innermost and the outermost. Chained in magical sleep, he is the god in the mountain, but he is also the roaming god in the outer spheres, the eternal wanderer. The Aztecs revered Saturn as Tecatlipoca, the black sun. This deity was a malevolent deity and demanded human sacrifice. Most people are aware of this tradition of the Aztecs. There is also a Voodoo deity called Baro Samedi. He dresses in black. Saturday is sacred to him, and he's a chaotic and lewd character. He's said to haunt graveyards especially, and is a deity connected to both the dead and the living. Moros concludes that the Saturnine deity appears in all of these cultures, and in each has similar characteristics, because he is a real entity and not simply an archetype. Even modern-day writers have modeled characters after the Saturnine character, including J.R. Tolkien. Some of the universal and common traits of the Saturnine deity include the following: darkness, trauma, chains, time, cold, disruption, ancestor, death, and of course the black cube. These are all characteristics of the Saturnine deity that are found across cultures. The fact that the deity is described as dark, usually black, denotes that it is malevolent, sinister, and connected with the underworld. The deity is intent on harming people and causing suffering and pain. It is not only able to inflict pain, but it likes to do so, and the harm usually involves death. In the Indian tradition, it is the gaze of Saturn that is the source of terror and trauma, because of the pain that accompanies these. All of the cultures that contain Saturnine worship also teach that this pain and suffering can be mitigated through sacrifice. Saturn is associated with chains and binding and restraint, as noted earlier. All of the traditions contain some notion of this. It is the classical tradition that banishes the deity to the world of the dead. It is important to note that the main properties of Saturn are to restrain and limit not only people but forces of nature as well. The Saturnine deity has a connection with time in that it is said to be ancient, old, or eternal. It represents things coming to an end, and of course this connects to death. Saturn is also referenced as being cold and distant and slow, but remember that Saturn is said to have emerged from the black primordial chaos. Cold is associated with darkness, death, and the underworld. Another characteristic associated with the Saturnine deity is disruption. The deity causes disruption and trouble and chaos. It is also seen as an ancestor figure, especially in the case of Rome. The Romans believed that Saturn was an ancestor of the Italic people. One of the ways Saturn is described by cultists is as an ancient and hoary ancestor. Saturn is a chthonic figure, which means he's associated with the underground and underworld. He has influence in the world of the dead, and this holds true in all of the traditions where Saturn worship is found. Because Saturn represents time, which destroys all things, he is connected with operations of necromancy and black magic. Necromancy is the practice of magic involving communication with the dead, either by summoning their spirits as apparitions, visions, or raising them bodily for the purpose of divination, imparting the means to foretell future events, discover hidden knowledge, to bring someone back from the dead, or to use the dead as a weapon. Sometimes referred to as death magic, the term may also sometimes be used in a more general sense to refer to black magic or witchcraft. An upcoming video will be about ceremonial magic and sorcery. Saturn is represented very frequently in the modern world by a black cube. Hence, Moros' book is called The Cult of the Black Cube. Sometimes Saturn's physical presence is represented by an obelisk as well. The Kaaba in Mecca, of course, is another example of the black cube. According to ancient myth, there's a black stone inside of the Kaaba that is made of iron that fell from the stars. Maybe a meteorite? According to Moros, the Saturnine deity is a leftover portion of the primordial chaos, which was cut off from chaos when the cosmos came into existence. The cube symbolizes this cutting because the straight edges and angles are clearly artificial. Therefore, this represents the restraining of Saturn and his imprisonment. The black cube appears over and over again in our modern world. Do a Google search for black cube and you will find many corporations that use it as a symbol. Symbols have the power to impact on a subconscious level. Some examples of corporate logos are shown on the screen, and in addition, you can see that a black cube is the main focus of none other than the United Nations Meditation Room, which is also pictured on the screen. On June 2nd, 2020, a coordinated global campaign called Blackout Tuesday was organized with the purpose of protesting racism and police brutality. One commenter, wise about how dark occultists act to put symbolism out into the world right under the noses of the uninitiated, commented that when people were being encouraged to post a black square on their social media, and millions did, they were actually co-opted into participating in an occult mass ritual. There are also many structures of the black cube erected in various places around the world. The cube or obelisk represents the spiritual dimension to which Saturn is banished, caught inside a spiritual prison. Moros says in his book that the ritual of setting up the black cube as Saturn's idol and calling the deity forth from the idol is symbolic of releasing Saturn from his prison. He notes that the horror author Clive Barker in his Hellraiser films understood this aspect of Saturn. Further, he says that it is reasonable to consider any conspicuous occurrence of the black cube in advertising, in promotion as a corporate symbol, as potentially symbolic of Saturn. So they are putting it all right out in front of us. Obviously, the cult of the Saturnine deity is still with us today. It is the cult of the black god. This black god is a dangerous god to become devoted to. The deity must be placated through means such as ritual, festival, and sacrifice. He is restrained and chained, but can be summoned via spells and incantations. According to Moros, he cannot manifest without being called. This is why it is so dangerous for people to play around with the occult if they do not understand what they are doing. An adept who decides to commit to the Saturnine Path makes a declaration of war on the spiritual powers that have imprisoned the deity. Saturn represents the deliberate rejection of the ruling cosmic order. We can see a definite example of the presence of the Saturnine cult in the modern-day world if we examine a German Thelemic society called Fraternitas Saturni, or Brotherhood of Saturn. Thelema, from the Greek word for will, is an approach to magic which attempts to assist the magician in the location of his or her particular destiny or true will. Another modern-day example of a Saturnian brotherhood formed in the late 20th century England is called the Order of the Nine Angles, or ONA. The ONA group teaches that a stargate exists near the planet Saturn itself. These two societies are just two examples that see Saturn as symbolic of some dark spiritual energy. According to Moros, a general Saturnine kingdom on Earth embraces the sovereignty of the chaos. The most startling statement I found in this section of the book was this statement: "The Saturnine deity is not a deity of brute force, but of subtlety and cunning. His revolution will not be one carried out through a force of arms, but rather through the spiritual planes as well as through the quiet corridors of power. A Saturnine kingdom today could, for example, manifest as a powerful state where there are cameras in every room, watchers on every street, and where people have gladly surrendered their civil liberties and dignity in exchange for safety and security." To me, that sounds exactly like what is going on right now. Saturnine magic is black magic. Spells are used to hurt people and to contact the dead. The path of sorcery includes secret arts like espionage and poisoning. One of the universal aspects of both the ancient cult of Saturn and the modern version is the concept of sacrifice. The deity demands the sacrifice of living beings, both animal and human. This is because Saturn is the reaper. His cult requires the death of, or at the very least, the blood of living beings, because power is achieved in exchange for blood. Moros says that the deity expects and demands blood. Sacrifice is a way of indicating a desire to return to chaos. The very last section of Moros's book includes practices, such as how to establish a shrine to Saturn and make offerings to it, establishing a magic link with the deity, daily practices for adherence, prayers, the wearing of chains of iron or steel, which is the metal of Saturn, giving charity in the deity's name, reciting mantras, and ways to keep Saturday and the festival of Saturnalia sacred. Finally, various rites, rituals, and incantations are given. And as I previously stated in the last video, I will not be covering that section of the book because I consider it very, very dangerous to repeat some of these incantations, and I have absolutely no desire to summon any forces of darkness, because my job is to clear people of the forces of darkness. In the next video, I'm going to examine the specific practice of satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, as seen through the eyes of a survivor.